Hi everyone, Brandon here, bringing you another video in the hopes to inform, inspire, and to bridge the divide that tries so hard to keep us from having peaceful and fruitful conversations. I really believe controversy and division only exist when we're not willing to hear each other out. I talk a lot about this on my channel, and I think you would find it not only informative, but encouraging. So make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Today, we're focused on the citizens of Ottawa. Now, everyone has heard of the truckers that showed up in Ottawa to protest vaccine mandates and vaccine passports. It quickly evolved and became a total stand for freedom for millions of Canadians who started to recognize the major problems our government needed to acknowledge. Amongst these crowds were vaccinated people, unvaccinated people, people from all different political parties, professions, industries, races, ages, religions. And I really want to hammer on the diversity here because we can't forget the words of our own Prime Minister, who referred to them as
small fringe minority.
We'll dive more into that comment in a moment. But first, let's talk about the Ottawa citizens and their response to thousands and thousands of trucks parked in their city streets. The thing is, the response is actually quite controversial. There were people signing sworn affidavits saying they didn't want the truckers there. But there were also sworn affidavits signed by citizens who said they wanted the trucks to be there. And so since then, the citizens who didn't want them there have pursued legal action, continuous complaints, and ultimately cheered on the unjustified, violent use of force made possible by the Emergency Act. Let's start there and ask the honest question. Was evoking the Emergency Act justified or purely political? Here is the Emergency Act criteria listed on the Government of Canada's website. It says, for the purposes of this act, a national emergency is an urgent and critical situation of a temporary nature that seriously endangers the lives, health, or safety of Canadians and is of such proportions or nature as to exceed the capacity or authority of a province to deal with it. Okay, let's pause and talk about this. No one's lives, health, or safety were endangered during these protests. And honest people will admit that the reality on the ground in Ottawa was largely peaceful and joyful. Kids were enjoying bouncy castles, barbecues were lit, hockey games were played, people danced, people hugged. But I suppose I'll mention the hearsay situation of truckers supposedly stealing food from homeless people, despite having an overabundance of food themselves. This too was repeated by our Prime Minister on national television. Oh, and I shouldn't forget the quote-unquote arrests that supposedly happened that we strangely don't get to see the details on, but it's important enough to make national news. The point is, even if there were a few people who misbehaved, that doesn't represent the millions of others who didn't. Anyway, where were we? Oh yes, the Emergency Act, Part B of the criteria. An urgent and critical situation that also seriously threatens the ability of the Government of Canada to preserve the sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity of Canada, and that cannot be effectively dealt with under any other law of Canada. This is another way of describing an insurrection, which this situation wasn't. This was a convoy of peaceful demonstrators who did their utmost best to not punish the citizens of Ottawa, but merely exercise their right to peacefully assemble in civil disobedience. Think about it. They kept emergency lanes open so that traffic could still come through. Any blockades you saw were done by police. The truckers shoveled and salted the sidewalks knowing plows wouldn't be coming. They donated their overabundance of food to the homeless. They went around and picked up garbage, which is a great indicator that they weren't there to trash the place. But what about the illegal blockades? The Ambassador Bridge was blocked, the Coutts-Alberta border was blocked, same with Emerson, Manitoba. Well, I'll add one more that I personally witnessed here in Sarnia, Ontario. Our local farmers drove 400 tractors down Highway 402 and clogged up the highway to slow traffic down. Now, what's consistent that not only happened here and at the other borders was that they left emergency lanes open. Again, they had no intention of sealing off the traffic, but the OPP decided to close the border completely. So yes, it was a blockade, but not by truckers. That was done by police. In the case of the Ambassador Bridge, same thing. There's also a tunnel that goes underneath the river there in Windsor, and it was completely open. So, yeah. And what I really don't understand, and maybe you guys can help me with this, there's over 100 different border crossings that connect the US to Canada. Do these 4 different borders really carry the fate of the nation? Or was it just too inconvenient for trucks to be rerouted instead? I think that's going to be a reoccurring topic here today. understanding the difference between inconvenient and impossible. But to put this border blockade situation to bed, I'll just finish by saying each trucker at these borders were not affiliated with the original convoy. The original convoy that came from Vancouver, BC consisted of just a few thousand trucks. Yes, other trucks tagged along and joined the movement, but they came on their own. They are individually responsible for the actions they took. So what are the reasons that some citizens couldn't stomach the truckers being there? I keep hearing that the truckers were violating their rights. Okay, what does that mean? Specifically, do they mean the ability to go to work and live their lives? Because they could have done that. The protests made things inconvenient, which is the nature of protests, but it didn't make things impossible. Like I said, lanes were left open, police ensured traffic was safely trickling through. So I really want to know, if you didn't go to work during the trucker protest, why didn't you go to work during the protest? Oh, because the business you worked for was closed. Okay, so if there weren't any lockdowns at the time and the truckers didn't ask them to close and didn't give them a legitimate reason to be closed, then I wonder why the businesses were closed. I think I'll just leave that one as a mystery for now. So before I jump to the next reason why some Ottawa citizens were angry the entire time the truckers were there, I think we need to keep something in mind to keep things fair. As much as Ottawa is the city in which people live, hence why they call it their city, Ottawa is also the capital city of Canada. This is the most appropriate place for any protest and any Canadian citizen to voice their opinion. So if you live in a city that represents all of Canada, you need to get over the fact that the city really belongs to every Canadian citizen. People have the right to peacefully assemble, and your right to not like it certainly does not override those rights. Okay, let's get into the big reason why some Ottawa citizens were so frustrated the whole time. The honking. Now, don't get me wrong, large truck horns are loud. In fact, they average in volume between 100 and 150 decibels. Was it illegal? Well, according to an Ottawa bylaw, it was. It says, "No person shall cause or permit the ringing of any bell, sounding of any horn, or shouting in a manner likely to disturb the inhabitants of this city." I'll give them this one. This bylaw was violated, and tickets were written and handed out. But the police soon realized that despite receiving tickets, the truckers weren't moving an inch. They were there for a far more important purpose, and they were prepared to pay the price of violating these bylaws. This is why the city had a judge issue a 10-day ban on honking. This gave them more flexibility to physically remove someone who dared to toot their horn. So why did it take these measures to get through to these truckers? Why was it the threat of being removed that got them to stop their honking? Well, this is how millions of diverse and unified Canadians see it. The reason the truckers were there was to bring the country's attention to one big problem, and the problem was this. Our Constitution had been thrown to the side by our government. There are specific criteria for a government to override our rights, and those criteria had never been met since day one of the pandemic. So let's do a little comparison. Honking a horn compared to our fundamental freedoms being stolen, never to return again. I'll let you decide what one is more serious. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then head over to my channel. I have videos describing exactly how this government has overreached and exactly how we are exercising our rights to stop them. So what about the people living in the noisy downtown? They couldn't sleep, they couldn't hear themselves think, it was driving them insane. And I can understand that. But at the same time, the people who signed affidavits saying they wanted the truckers there, how was it not driving them crazy? How were they able to sleep? In fact, how were the truckers themselves able to get sleep? Well, you're not going to believe this, but the truckers actually didn't honk during normal sleeping hours. In fact, it was reported that weekdays it mostly stopped around 9 p.m., and on weekends, with the crowds that would get much larger, it would go till 10 p.m., and then continuing the next day during business hours. Imagine that. That seems like a good stretch of silence to get some much-needed shut-eye. So how is it that some citizens can be angry while some of them are happy about the truckers' presence? Here's my theory. If you already don't like a person, as soon as they utter an annoying sound out of their mouth, or in this case, their trucks, it just elevates your distaste for that person. I mean, think about it. If you were someone who was angry about the horns, you were likely angry about these truckers' views before they got to Ottawa. And thanks to the media and our Prime Minister for painting these people as anything but intelligent and respectful people, it became very easy for the public to believe certain things prior to the truckers arriving in Ottawa. And let's not forget this, Prime Minister Trudeau could have stopped this the very day they arrived in Ottawa. How? By meeting with them, addressing their issues, not spitting on them and insulting them while fleeing the city to his cottage for a week. So if you want to be angry, go ahead and be angry, but make sure you're aiming that anger at the right people. These protesters, whether you realize it or not, they are fighting for you. You may not appreciate it right now because the effects of our rights being taken may not have reached your door yet, but don't wait till it comes knocking for you to do something. Stand up with your neighbors and fellow citizens. You don't have to agree on every underlying issue, but as long as you can recognize that the security of our rights are under attack, we can stand together. And what a great opportunity to put our differences aside. We've been divided for too long, and it's time to come together. We need each other. To be honest with you, I think these angry citizens still have no idea why those protesters gathered in Ottawa by the millions. They haven't taken the time to hear the protester side of the conversation, and they fall line, hook, and sinker for everything the media feeds to them, which is sad but unfortunately true. So I think it all comes down to this. When you're misinformed or indoctrinated to believe something false about someone, your perspective of their intentions will always be the opposite of those who aren't. And that's why some people are angry and some people are thrilled. Two very different emotions, but also two very different perspectives on reality. Once people grasp the real and important reasons why this movement started and is still happening, hopefully they'll start to see that complaining about small things like noises or double-parked trucks pales in comparison to the threats we face as a nation. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. If you're not subscribed, please do so. And I rely heavily on you wonderful people sharing these videos. So please send this video to your friend, your neighbor, your frenemy. Do it with kindness and respect. And finally, always, always stay Canadian.